Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange, live from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I'm pleased to be joined by my longtime colleague, Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe and ESPN, and among other things. And Bob, it's so great to see you here out in North Carolina.
Well, that's become over the years kind of a home away from home, because it's becoming this association's event for 25 years, starting in Salisbury. And I have an affiliation now with High Point University, and so I probably spend more time in North Carolina outside of any other state other than Massachusetts.
Well, you know, amazingly enough, folks, I met Bob at the Palace of Auburn Hills, and he was covering the NBA draft, and I was, and that's when we started a long friendship. And now the last 3 years that I've been going to this event, I had the great pleasure of hanging out with Bob, and now it's just so great that we have an opportunity to talk and do this broadcast. So, you know what? I am so thrilled to be in your company, Mr. Ryan, for sure.
So that's very kind. Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's talk a little about your ESPN situation. I know you worked on a bunch of programs over there, and then talk about the Boston Globe.
Well, I identify myself as a writer. When I look in the mirror, I see a writer, and the television has been great. It's a great adjunct. It certainly extended my visibility. You know, you can't deny that. And I'm very grateful for the association. I spent 29 years on the Sports Reporters and Sunday mornings. I filled in for Tony and Mike on PTI for about 15 years on vacations and summer. And I'm still ongoing around the horn. I'm a charter member of the Around the Horn Show, which came into being in November of 2002. It's hard to believe it, you know, that this is the 20th year, will be the 20th anniversary this November of that program. And but I'm still around every other week on that show, and so that keeps me visible to the world at large. But you know, still, what I am at the core is a writer.
Very good. All right, so Bob, I know you've been to a zillion sporting events anyways, but let's talk about the best sporting event that you've ever covered.
Well, I don't have one. That's impossible. I always answer this question with I go by sport, you know, and even then it's, you know, but in basketball. It's still that triple overtime. Two things: a pro game and a college game. Pro game was a triple overtime thing. Phoenix and Celtics in 1976. 46 years later, it stands the test of time as a phenomenal event. It was just an amazingly emotional night. Crazy things happened as well in the game, and it's just memorable, you know. And that stands out. College, Duke, Kentucky. I was there. Later shot, the hill pass, the whole thing. Even without that, it was a spectacular game. It was a spectacular ending to a spectacular game, and the best, well-played, high-efficient college game that I've ever covered. I'm not saying it's the best one, but it's got to be up there. Football, the most memorable thing for us in Boston, for me, was the Patriots. The year they won their first Super Bowl, was beating Oakland to get to it. Vinatieri's 49-yard field goal in the snow. It was a remarkable
No, I think it that way.
That's the Tuckville game, you know, which which was a proper calling of a terrible rule, which they finally got rid of. And you've got that. I've even got a hockey one with the Bruins beat the Lightning when they en route to the Stanley Cup in 2011. 1-0 in a Game 7, in a game in which there were no penalties. And the coach Guy Boucher of the Lightning described it as 60 minutes of overtime. So we got to the hour. And so I've got that. Now I get to baseball. And it's not one thing. I've seen so many anyway, but it's not one thing. It's a combination of two games in 2004 ALCS. After the Red Sox have been down 3-0 and no team had ever come back from 3-0 in baseball, and they'd be beaten 19-8 in Game 3 and just pummeled. And doom and gloom was all we had. Doom and gloom. They pull out Game 4 with the famous ninth inning against Rivera. With Millar walking, Dave Roberts in his famous stolen base, certainly Red Sox history, and Bill Miller driving in a tying run. Poppy wins the game with a home run, and they come back same calendar day. That game ended at midnight. The next game started at 5 p.m. So they both would have ended the same day, and they go 14 innings to beat the Yankees. High drama throughout, and over 11 hours. So that's my baseball.
Unbelievable. All right, so let me tell you, you and I joked around about this one time when we were eating dinner, so now I got to bring it up again. How many states have you actually seen a sporting event in?
49, and I'm determined to get that 50th, which is South Dakota. And there's only limited opportunities, of course, but that's my goal. And when I do, I hope I get a chance to write the story. You know, and be able to write, because I've been to sporting events in 49 states, and damn it, I got to get to that.
Well, you got the South Dakota Jackrabbits or something.
I got the Jackrabbits. I'd love to go see a Jackrabbits game. I would, that would be my preference. Although the high school tournament, I wouldn't mind going to the courthouse and Mitchell to see a high school. I believe the local school plays there. That would be my real thing. I'd love to, but I got to make this happen. How much time do I have? I don't know.
You know the way you look, you probably have a whole lot more time than I do. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about the relationship between the team's media when you first began, because I know it had to be a whole lot different, and then I'll talk about today.
Well, my frame of reference was the NBA, and the NBA in 1969 was still a 14-team league, and newspapers were the currency that mattered. Local television had no role, local radio had no role, other than the play-by-play people. But I mean, in terms of coverage, it was newspapers, and the Boston Globe was the most important journalistic entity in all of New England. And I was the envoy for the Boston Globe covering the Celtics, and we went to every practice. We traveled with them. There were no charter flights. We lived a life with them. And they got to know us as people, you know. And that opportunity does not exist anymore on the level that we knew. It just doesn't. There's no, the interaction, the social interaction is restricted. You have to go through hoops sometimes to get an interview with your own player, as opposed to walking up to them in the locker room before the game or after the game. I used to go to before practice every day for hours, sit around the schmooze, no notebook. And then after practice, I come in and get the story after having watched practice. And I got to learn the whole place. I knew the whole offense. And nobody has that opportunity anymore. Right. And it's vastly different.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go with it, obviously. Doesn't it seem like the media and the communications are a lot more guarded now than they've ever been?
Oh, sure. And then restriction at the games. We sat at the courtside. I sat next to the visiting bench always at home, so I could hear what's going on and talk to people. And now nobody sits at courtside. They kick you off, you know, wherever they put you. And it used to be the part of the fun was the audio. You know, you'd hear things, and you know that. And it's just so vastly different. Truly, when you sit in Boston, what happened? Things that happen at the far end, they're up in the corner. Right. If something important is going on at the far end of the court, you're not going to have a good viewer. You're not going to have a good viewer. And that's what, by the way, they even stick their own radio people, believe it or not, their own home. And there's no respect for, and it's no respect for journalism, right? The print people at all.
Yeah, it's funny because I've gone to some recent NBA games and they stuck me on the press box.
Oh no,
and it's not like when you're sitting by courtside where you get to watch a coach.
I always kid about this. I look down and I'll see some kid, 5-year-old kid eating ice cream with a seat I should have.
Wow,
that's my frame of reference.
Oh, that's strong. All right, so let's talk about social media's emergence in the industry. Do you get involved with it much?
I tweet. I gave up on Facebook after a year. I found out it dead end street for me. I don't do Instagram, but I do tweet. And so that's my connection with the world at large there. And sometimes I say, why do I do this? Because no matter what you do or say, someone is bound to misinterpret or misconstrue it, depending on their point of view. But I still do it, and I don't restrict it to sports, obviously, and whatever rim. But I do tweet, yes.
Okay, so with that said, okay, what do you actually tell younger people that want to get into the business? You tell them to be a writer before they get into broadcasting?
I say the one thing, and this holds true for broadcasting as well, because it has to do with words and summoning your thoughts. Read. If you're not a reader, reading is the most 24/7, 365-day preoccupation. You're in the wrong business. And people say, well, what's got to do with broadcasting? Well, you have to have summon facts and references and phrase things in a literal way as well. So reading is the key to everything, and that will never change.
Okay, so you obviously talked about a little bit earlier. Tell me some of the biggest highlights of your career. I know you've had a lot of them. You've attended. I can't say how many.
I would say one of the great thrills, one of the great I didn't accomplish it, but satisfactions. When the Bruins won the Stanley Cup in 2011, it meant that I could now say that I have been there on the spot to cover Boston teams winning championships in all 4 major sports. You know, and the one outlier was the Bruins, because when they last won prior to that was 1973. I was covering the Celtics. I had nothing to do with hockey coverage. But I have now covered, you know, several Patriots, obviously, and the Red Sox in 4 and 7. I retired by 13 and 18. But I've been there as a season ticket holder, covered, and then finally I got the Bruins. I've been to memorable Final Fours, of course. And the other thing that was not a part of my playing when I started, that became a very important part of my repertoire, was the Olympics. And I went to 6 summer and 5 winter Olympics. And starting with the Dream Team thing in '92 and ending in 2012 in London. That was my last official act before I retired officially, was hitting the send button on the gold medal game in London in 2012. But I think it was really fun to be able to say that I've been able to write, you know, the closing stories on championships in all 4 major sports.
I know today you talked a lot about game day, so I'm going to get into it just a little bit. We talked about the old NBA versus the new NBA. You know, back in the bad boys, I enjoyed watching that pair of basketball. Now it seems more of a jump shooter type of sport.
Well, it's the 3-point shot has become the currency. It's not a part of the game. It's the most crucial thing, not just an adjunct, which it started out being. It's the currency. It's a different game now. The concept used to be the game was played inside out. That was the goal, and now it's outer space and Curry land, you know, and that's the game, and it's not going to change. It's not going to change. It's different. I still enjoy basketball, but not as much. I'm looking for balance. I like something. I miss good pivot play. You'll never see another Kevin McHale, and that's too bad. You know, you might not have seen one anyway. You're not even going to see anybody even try to be another Kevin McHale. It's like that's an artifact. You're not going to see. It's like he cuts too. You're not going to see it.
Do you find they're thought to be a little bit too much drama in today's NBA, especially knowing that I've seen a lot of players, you know, I guess I have to pick on Kyrie Irving and a lot of these other guys that are bad. I don't hate to say bad for the game, but they're not helping the image of it.
Oh, Kyrie stands apart. He's an entirely different type. He stands apart. There's never been an NBA player of consequence so unfathomable. You know, he's a different story. I'm not sure. I'm not. I can live with it. You know, I'm not put off by it. I can deal with it. He's just a different story.
Okay, is there any other sport that you like covering the most? What's your favorite sport?
Well, the question. This is a technical question. People say, "What are my favorite sport to cover?" And they're always surprised when I say golf, and for a very simple reason. You have to play it in daylight, so you don't have to worry about deadlines when you do with everything else. You can write what you want to write, and you can get it done as well as you can write it, because you don't have the only time you run into trouble in golf in the Eastern Time Zone is on Saturday, because you have an early edition on Sunday, so you have to write twice on Saturday as a conference. Every other day, when the tournament ends, you've got plenty of time to make your dinner, and you can write the story you want. Plus, I enjoy it. Now, if I didn't like it, you know, but I do. And I enjoyed covering golf. I like the rhythm of the tournaments. I like the Saturday Ryder Cups, and that was several British Opens, the Open, as they say, and that was a fun part. I really enjoyed it.
Well, you talked earlier at the book signing about covering a lot of baseball games and basketball games. Can you expound on that thought that you covered so many, and which sport do you prefer over the other? Because, you know, you talked about, how many baseball games and basketball
I have no idea how many total. I mean, there's 1,400 games in my book that we went through to get to, that's just since 1977. So, you know, it's not like I started watching baseball in 1977. I started watching baseball when I was 5 years old. But, and so I don't know. I mean, I always say, if you had those are my 2 favorite sports. My foundation sports growing up, I call that baseball and college basketball. Those are the 2 things that I was reading on more than anything else. And I fell into the NBA out of, you know, that's what I did. They handed me the beat when I was 23, and I fell in love with the NBA, no question. I'm very grateful to the NBA and Celtics for providing me a springboard for a career. But if you had asked me at age 20, what do you want to do? Would you rather be a baseball writer or a basketball writer? I know I would definitely say baseball, and because of my love for baseball. And now that I've done both, you know, after a year of baseball, I only covered the whole season once, and that's for another reason. And everything else is a job, varying degrees of pleasure. Covering baseball is a lifestyle. It starts in spring training, it ends in the World Series. Depending on the paper you work for, you'll see a minimum of 120, and maybe even a maximum of 162 plus playoff games. And it's a lifestyle, and it's a very, very different experience than any of the other sports. I laugh at the football, once a week, big deal. And I wouldn't want to cover football. Too much downtime. Give me some games. You got one game and you got 6 days of chatting. I'd rather sport like playing more often.
And a couple more questions before we wrap it up, okay? And that's this. We've talked about sports in general, but talk about some of your favorite top players that you've had a chance to witness in your career that really been, unbelievable for you to look at.
Well, the first great player that I got to cover was John Havlicek, and get to know him as a person. And I wound up doing a book. My first collaborative book was with John Havlicek, and he's not being treated in history hardly the way he should. People have all these lists of top players, and the worst you can say about him is a top 15 player, and he very likely is a top 10. And people don't realize that he was every bit as good as Oscar Robertson and Jerry West, the two guys who were the most prominent players, non-centers of that time. But the best player turned out to be Larry Bird in that cover. Never thought when Havlicek retired I'd cover anybody better, but Larry Bird was better. But as a personality, Dave Cameron was still my favorite subject ever in terms of the combination of the skill and the style and the personality. And plus, I had a personal relationship where he wound up retiring in my hotel room, which is nobody has not too many writers have an experience like that. So, but baseball, obviously, I was able to there for the latter part of Carl Yastrzemski's career. To cover him as he marched into the Hall of Fame. Who I love? Louis Tiant. Louis Tiant was great. Pedro, naturally, Martinez. We had three great pitchers, Clemens in his prime, and we had that succession: Tiant, Clemens, Pedro, pretty good pitchers. So there's things to say about.
Any thoughts about Gordy Hammond and Magic Johnson?
Well, the first NHL game I saw in Boston, Gordy was still with the Red Wings, and that's the specific reason I wanted to go see the game, so I could say I saw Gordy Howe. This is 1964, and he still had a ways to go. He hadn't even yet gone to the Railers to play with the kids, and this is in the future. But so I got to see him. Who I can say I saw? The Rocket. My first NHL game in 1960, I was taken to the Madison Square Garden and playing the Canadiens and the Rocket with Charles last year. So I can say I never saw him. So I got to see him. I can say that I did that, and now that's a distinction.
Unbelievable. So, all right, now we're here promoting a book, so let's give everybody a little bit of information about the book that you're selling and how they can find it.
It's called In Scoring Position, and it reflects the fact that since 1977, I have every of my Baseball Writers Association scorebooks. I've covered or attended. I didn't have to cover them all. I attended games and covered them and scored every single game I've been to, Major League, Minor League, and one famous college game between Arizona State and North Carolina that produced 9 Major League players and 2 future Major League managers. Well, that game's in the book. And in conjunction with Bill Chuck, who was a renowned baseball historian and researcher, it was his idea to do the book. We collaborate to go over these games, oddities, one-off things that only happen in baseball, things that only happen rarely or if ever, and historical games. And I write, and if there's a personal anecdote that I can attach it, put that in there. And so at the top of each page of the game is the representation of the scorebook page or question. I write what the whole big deal is. I give an example. Here's an example. One time only in history, I won a game in which Scott Hatteberg hit in successive at-bats, hit into a triple play, and hit a grand slam. That's never happened before or since in baseball. And I've got that game. So if you care about stuff like that, and unique things that can happen in baseball, there's 150 games of all kinds of stuff. I call it stuff. And I think baseball has more conversational fodder available in it when you have the 3 games put together. It's just the history of baseball is a little more extensive, and there's more complexity and all different things that can happen. So the book is course called In Scoring Position, and it's by Triumph Books. All the usual suspects, do it from your local bookstore if you can. That's the most important thing. But if not, yeah, go to Amazon. I'm not going to prevent you from doing that. But not after you have tried your local bookstore.
Well, Bob, it's been great to have the friendship that we've had over the years. We've had finally an opportunity to bring on this edition of the Sports Exchange. We are here from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And, again, I enjoyed coming to this event. And there's certain people you always look forward to seeing. And you're definitely at the top of my list. And I can't thank you very much for being a part of this. And more importantly, you're a bigger friend and a legend. And anybody can imagine. It's just a thrill to spend time with you today. We have a great weekend ahead. Thanks. God bless, Bob. And I look forward to hearing your story on that 50th estate.
I got to make that happen.
You will.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob. God
Okay,
bless.
Scott.
Thank you.